Brother, when you remember, you feel alive. That's it. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I've been sitting there.
It was supposed to be just another Sunday morning service at Household of Faith Church in Benton, Arkansas. The congregation settled in, expecting Pastor Bob Joyce to deliver his usual heartfelt sermon about faith and redemption. But what happened next will go down as one of the most shocking moments in music history. Bob Joyce, now 89 years old, stepped up to the pulpit with something different in his eyes. Not the usual gentle warmth his congregation had come to love. This was raw. This was pain. This was a man who had carried a secret so heavy it was literally killing him. His voice started to shake as he gripped the sides of the podium. "I need to tell you something," he said, his words cutting through the church like a knife. "Something I should have said a long time ago." The congregation leaned forward. Something was wrong. This wasn't their pastor's usual cadence. This wasn't rehearsed. This was a man on the edge of breaking. "For over 40 years, I've lived with a burden that's eaten me alive," Bob continued, his voice cracking with emotion. "I've prayed about it. I've wrestled with it. I've asked God to show me the right path. And today I can't carry it anymore." He paused, tears streaming down his weathered face. The church was dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. "My name is Bob Joyce. I am your pastor. I am a servant of God. But I am also..." His voice broke completely. "I am also the man the world knew as Elvis Presley." The gasps echoed through the sanctuary. Some people started crying. Others sat in stunned silence. A few got up and walked out, unable to process what they'd just heard. But Bob wasn't finished. The floodgates had opened, and decades of pain came pouring out. "I didn't fake my death for fame. I didn't do it for money. I did it because I had to. Because staying Elvis Presley meant dying for real, and I wasn't ready to leave this world. Not when I'd finally found my purpose." He talked about the crushing weight of fame, the isolation, the drugs that nearly killed him multiple times, the people who wanted to control him, exploit him, use him up until there was nothing left. "August 16th, 1977, wasn't the day Elvis died," he said, his voice gaining strength. "It was the day Elvis was set free. Free to find God, free to serve others, free to become the man I was always meant to be." The confession kept coming. Bob described the elaborate plan, the people who helped him disappear, the agony of watching his family grieve a death that never happened. He talked about Lisa Marie growing up without her father, not because he was dead, but because he was a coward who chose his own peace over her pain. "I've watched from the shadows as Priscilla carried the burden of my choice. I've seen how my selfishness destroyed my daughter's life." His hands trembled as he continued. "But I can't die with this secret. I can't meet my maker with this deception on my soul. So I'm telling you now, all of you, the truth I should have told 46 years ago." The church erupted. Some people shouted, "Hallelujah!" Others screamed, "Liar!" The scene was chaos, but Bob Joyce stood there, finally unburdened, finally free. "I know what this means," he said, his voice cutting through the noise. "I know what I've lost. I know what I've cost others. But I also know that truth sets you free. And for the first time in decades, I can breathe." He stepped back from the pulpit, a broken man who had finally found his voice. But this confession, it was just the beginning, because what Bob Joyce revealed next would make this bombshell look like a whisper. The moment Bob Joyce's confession hit the internet, one person's phone started ringing off the hook. Priscilla Presley's phone. And according to Bob's explosive revelation, she didn't just know the truth. She'd been fighting to keep it buried for decades. 3 days after I made my confession, Bob told his stunned congregation, his voice still shaking, Priscilla called me. Not through her people, not through lawyers. She called me directly, and what she said, it changed everything. Bob's hands gripped the pulpit tighter as he continued. She was furious, angrier than I'd ever heard her. She screamed at me for 20 minutes straight, called me selfish, called me a coward, said I'd destroyed everything she'd worked for. But here's what nobody knew. This wasn't their first conversation, not even close. Priscilla has known the truth for years, Bob confessed, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. She's known since 1982. She found me, she tracked me down, and she made me promise to never, ever tell anyone who I really was. The church erupted again, but Bob pushed through the noise. She told me that Lisa Marie was finally healing, that the Presley name meant something, that revealing the truth would destroy not just her life, but our daughter's life. And like a fool, I believed her. But the phone call 3 days ago? That was different. That was Priscilla Presley, at her most desperate and most dangerous. She didn't just ask me to stay quiet this time, Bob revealed, his voice gaining strength. She threatened me, said she'd destroy my church, my reputation, everything I'd built as Bob Joyce. She said she had lawyers ready to prove I was a fraud, a con man taking advantage of grieving Elvis fans. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Priscilla was threatening to destroy Bob Joyce by claiming he wasn't Elvis Presley, when she knew damn well he was. But that's not the worst part, Bob continued, his voice cracking again. Bob's confession revealed the devastating truth about Priscilla's public statements over the years. Every time she dismissed the Bob Joyce rumors, every time she said people needed to let Elvis rest, she wasn't protecting his memory. She was protecting her own secrets. Priscilla built an empire on my death, Bob said, his voice filled with decades of suppressed anger. Graceland, the merchandising, the movies, the books, all of it was built on the story of Elvis dying young, dying tragic, dying a victim of his own success. But if Elvis didn't die, if he chose to disappear, if he abandoned his family to find God, that story crumbles. And with it, everything Priscilla had built. She begged me to recant, Bob revealed. Offered me money, offered to set up a fund for my church, said she'd make sure I was taken care of for the rest of my life if I just say it was all a lie, that I was confused, that I was seeking attention. The manipulation was breathtaking. Priscilla wasn't just asking Bob to stay quiet. She was asking him to destroy his own credibility, his own reputation, to protect hers. But I couldn't do it anymore, Bob said, his voice breaking with emotion. I couldn't let Lisa Marie's memory be tainted by lies. I couldn't let my daughter think her father was a drug-addicted failure when the truth was so much more complicated. The final blow came when Bob revealed what Priscilla said at the end of that devastating phone call. She told me that if I didn't fix this, if I didn't make it go away, she'd make sure the world knew what kind of father I really was, what kind of man abandons his family to play preacher. Priscilla Presley, the woman who'd spent decades as the grieving widow, the devoted keeper of Elvis's flame, was now threatening to destroy the man she once loved to protect the lie she'd helped create. But Bob Joyce wasn't backing down. Not this time. I told her the truth was out now, that I was done being her prisoner, done being afraid of what people would think. The war between Bob Joyce and Priscilla Presley had begun, and what came next would shock the world even more than his confession. After decades of silence, after years of carrying the weight of a secret that nearly destroyed him, Bob Joyce was finally ready to tell the whole truth. Not just who he was, but why Elvis Presley had to die. And the reason? It's darker than anyone could have imagined. People think I faked my death because I was tired of being famous, Bob said, his voice steady now, strengthened by the burden finally lifting. They think it was about the pressure, the drugs, the lifestyle. But that's not the truth. The truth is I was going to be killed, for real this time. The church fell silent again. This wasn't about escaping fame anymore. This was about escaping death. By 1977, I owed the wrong people too much money, Bob continued, his hands gripping the pulpit. Not just gambling debts, not just the colonel's schemes. I'm talking about dangerous people. People who didn't care if I was the king of rock and roll. They cared about the millions of dollars I couldn't pay back. Bob's confession revealed a side of Elvis's final years that nobody knew. The drugs weren't just about numbing the pain of fame. They were about numbing the terror of knowing that every day could be his last. I was getting death threats daily. My phones were tapped. People were following Lisa Marie to school, following Priscilla to the grocery store. They weren't just coming after me, they were coming after my family. The desperation in Bob's voice was palpable. This wasn't a man who chose to abandon his family. This was a man who was trying to save them. Dr. Nick knew. He was the one who came up with the plan. He said the only way to keep everyone safe was to make Elvis Presley disappear permanently. Not just hide, disappear. And the only way to do that was to die. But here's the part that makes it even more tragic. The plan wasn't just Bob's idea, it was a family decision. Priscilla knew, Bob revealed, his voice cracking with emotion. She knew about the threats. She knew about the debt. She knew that if Elvis stayed alive, none of us would be safe. She agreed to the plan. She helped plan my funeral. The betrayal wasn't Bob abandoning his family. It was Priscilla later pretending she'd been abandoned. We agreed I'd stay dead for 5 years, long enough for the heat to die down, for the debts to be written off, for the dangerous people to move on to other targets. Then I'd come back. We'd reunite the family. We'd start over somewhere safe. But 5 years turned into 10. 10 turned into 20. And before Bob knew it, he'd been dead longer than he'd been alive. Every year I'd call Priscilla. Every year she'd say it wasn't safe yet, that Lisa Marie was doing well, that revealing the truth would only hurt her, that the Presley estate needed more time to stabilize. What Bob didn't realize was that Priscilla had found something she'd never had when Elvis was alive. Control. Complete, total control over his legacy, his money, his story. She'd built an empire on my death, Bob said, his voice filled with decades of suppressed rage. And she wasn't about to let me come back and destroy it. The most heartbreaking part of Bob's confession wasn't about the money or the fame. It was about Lisa Marie. My daughter died thinking I was a failure, thinking I was weak, thinking I chose drugs over her love. She spent her whole life trying to live up to a ghost, trying to honor a father she thought had abandoned her for his addictions. Bob's voice broke completely as he continued. Lisa Marie struggled with drugs her whole life because she thought it was in her DNA. She thought she was destined to fail because her father did. She died carrying shame that wasn't hers to carry. But the final revelation was the most shocking of all. I tried to tell her, Bob whispered, tears streaming down his face. In 2020, I reached out to Lisa Marie directly. I told her who I was. I told her I was her father. I told her I was alive and I was sorry. The congregation held its breath. She hung up on me, called me a sick old man trying to profit off her pain. She died thinking I was a fraud, her own father, and she died thinking I was just another con artist. Bob's confession revealed the ultimate tragedy, a father who faked his death to save his family, only to lose them forever because of that choice. I became Bob Joyce because Elvis Presley was a dead man walking. But in saving Elvis, I killed the father Lisa Marie needed. I killed the husband Priscilla deserved. I killed the man I was supposed to be. The weight of 46 years of regret, guilt, and lost love crashed down on Bob Joyce as he stood before his congregation, finally free to tell the truth, but too late to save the people he'd destroyed trying to protect. I'm telling you this now because I'm dying, Bob said, his voice barely audible. The doctors say I have months, maybe weeks, and I can't meet my maker carrying this lie. I can't face Lisa Marie in heaven knowing she died hating a father who never stopped loving her. The truth was finally out. But the cost of that truth, it was everything Bob Joyce had left to lose. The moment Bob Joyce's full confession hit the airwaves, the world exploded. This wasn't just a celebrity rumor anymore. This was a dying man's final testimony. And the ripple effects are tearing through Memphis, Graceland, and what's left of the Presley legacy like a hurricane. Within hours of the confession going viral, Priscilla Presley's legal team issued an emergency statement. But here's what shocked everyone. They didn't deny Bob's claims. Instead, they threatened him with defamation lawsuits, demanded he retract his statements, and warned that further revelations would result in severe legal consequences. Why would you threaten someone for lying unless they were telling the truth? The Presley estate went into full damage control mode. Trading was suspended on Elvis-related merchandise. Tours of Graceland were temporarily halted. Licensing deals worth millions of dollars were suddenly in jeopardy. Because if Elvis didn't die in 1977, if he chose to abandon his family, then the entire foundation of the Presley empire crumbles. But the fans? The fans are divided like never before. Half of them feel vindicated. They've spent decades believing Elvis was still alive, and now they have confirmation from the man himself. They're flooding Bob Joyce's church, camping outside, holding vigils, singing Elvis songs through the night. For them, this isn't betrayal, it's resurrection. The other half feel destroyed. They've mourned Elvis for 46 years. They've visited his grave, bought his records, kept his memory alive, and now they're being told it was all based on a lie? That their grief was manufactured? That they've been played for fools by the very people they trusted to honor his legacy? Social media is a war zone. #Elvis lied is trending alongside #Elvis lives. Graceland's social media accounts are flooded with angry comments demanding answers. Priscilla Presley's Instagram has been shut down after receiving thousands of messages calling her a fraud, a liar, a manipulator who built her fortune on deception. But the most heartbreaking response? It's coming from Lisa Marie's friends and family. They're revealing that Lisa Marie had confided in them about the strange phone call in 2020, about an old man claiming to be her father, about how it had sent her into a spiral of depression and drug use because part of her wondered if it could be true. Lisa Marie died questioning everything, one close friend revealed. She spent her last years wondering if her father had really abandoned her, if he was out there somewhere, watching her struggle and choosing not to help. The guilt is eating Bob Joyce alive, but he's not backing down. In a follow-up statement from his hospital bed, because yes, the 89-year-old man is now hospitalized from the stress of his confession, Bob issued a final plea. I know I've destroyed lives. I know I've shattered dreams. I know I've broken hearts that were already broken. But I couldn't die with this lie on my soul. I couldn't face my daughter in heaven knowing she thought I was weak, when the truth was, I was just afraid. He's asking for forgiveness, not just from his fans, but from his family, from Priscilla, despite their war, from Lisa Marie's memory, from everyone whose life was built around the myth he helped create. But forgiveness might be the one thing Bob Joyce can't find. Because how do you forgive someone for stealing 46 years of truth? How do you forgive someone for letting you grieve a lie? The legal battles are just beginning. The emotional fallout will last generations. And Bob Joyce? He's running out of time to make things right. But he's done something that nobody expected. He's given the world a choice. You can keep believing the beautiful lie that Elvis died young, tragic, and legendary. Or you can accept the ugly truth that he lived long, cowardly, and broken. The question is, which story can you live with? Because now that the truth is out, there's no going back. For anyone. this story is still unfolding. What do you think about Bob Joyce's shocking confession? Are you Team Bob or Team Priscilla? Drop your thoughts below, and if you want the full breakdown of Lisa Marie's final recordings about her father, smash that subscribe button because that video drops tomorrow.
Even presidents aren't allowed upstairs at Graceland. In fact, in all the decades since Elvis's death, only one person got an exception to the rule.
Behind Graceland's velvet ropes, there's a door that stayed locked for 47 years. Untouched, unspoken of, and fiercely protected. Most fans never even knew it existed. But now, that silence is broken. And what's been found inside is rewriting everything we thought we knew about the king of rock and roll. The upstairs of Graceland wasn't just Elvis's private sanctuary. It was a sacred zone. Even his closest friends, the Memphis Mafia, were rarely allowed past that staircase. And after his death in 1977, the family kept it sealed. No tours, no cameras, no exceptions. For nearly 5 decades, it became the most mysterious space in American pop culture. A room frozen in time, hidden just a few feet away from where millions of fans walked each year. So why now? That answer begins with Riley Keough, Elvis's granddaughter. In the wake of Lisa Marie's sudden passing, Riley stepped into a role she never asked for, the sole trustee of Graceland's legacy. And almost immediately, whispers began circulating. Whispers that Riley wasn't just managing an estate. She was unsealing a truth her grandfather had gone to great lengths to bury. It started with a key. According to sources close to the family, Riley was going through a box of Lisa Marie's personal items when she found a velvet pouch containing a single antique key and a folded letter. The letter was addressed to her, but the handwriting? It was unmistakably Elvis's. The contents of that letter haven't been made public, not entirely, but Riley confirmed in a recent interview that it changed the way she sees everything. She says it led her to that infamous staircase, to the locked door at the top, and to a truth her mother had quietly protected all her life. What's upstairs isn't just a bedroom. It's a living time capsule. The bed is still made. His reading glasses rest exactly where he left them. Even the styrofoam cups he drank from the night before he died, still there. The air is said to carry a smell of cologne and vinyl. And on the bedside table, a notebook with scribbled lyrics, some unfinished, some eerily prophetic. But this wasn't about nostalgia. Riley didn't go up there for a memory. She went up looking for answers. You see, Elvis spent the final months of his life increasingly withdrawn, away from the stage, away from Hollywood. He confined himself to those upstairs rooms, sleeping odd hours, speaking in riddles, and writing furiously in private journals no one was allowed to read. Some said he was paranoid. Others said he was on to something. What Riley found up there shattered the image of Elvis as just a fading icon. Behind that locked door was the real man, lonely, guarded, and carrying secrets too heavy for the spotlight. So, why did he guard this place so fiercely? Because upstairs was where the betrayal began. A betrayal that started years earlier, one that Elvis buried beneath loyalty and silence. It wasn't about fame. It wasn't about money. It was about trust. And according to Riley, the pain from that betrayal followed him until the very end. The truth? Elvis was hiding from more than just the public. He was hiding from the people closest to him. And the clues to that betrayal? They weren't buried in Hollywood gossip or tabloid headlines. They were locked inside that room. In a journal entry dated just 3 weeks before his death, Elvis wrote, "Even the ones I love most have no idea who's watching me. This house don't feel like mine anymore." But who was watching him? And why did Lisa Marie keep that room sealed? Then came the biggest shock of all. Hidden beneath the journals was a small metal box locked with a 4-digit code. Riley cracked it with Elvis's birthday. Inside, a bundle of sealed letters, an old cassette tape, and a document marked "Confidential, Graceland Study." The tape was faint but unmistakable. It was Elvis, speaking softly, exhausted, almost as if he were whispering in the dark. "If anything ever happens to me, it's not the pills. That's what they'll say. But it's deeper than that. You'll find it in my study, behind the shelf. Don't let them take this place." Those were his words. And when Riley went to the study, she found it. A false panel behind a bookshelf concealed a leather folder. Inside were handwritten letters from Elvis to his father Vernon, begging him to protect Graceland from being turned into a trap. There was also a legal document, never filed, where Elvis named a different executor for the estate. Not Priscilla, not even Lisa Marie. Someone else entirely. And next to it, pages of unpublished song lyrics. One of them titled simply, "The Chain Never Breaks." Elvis wrote that just 2 days before he died. But what did he mean by, "They'll say it's the pills"? Was Elvis warning his family? Was he trying to say his death wasn't an accident? Lisa Marie seemed to believe it. In one of her final entries, she wrote, "He knew. He always knew. The curse wasn't about fate. It was about trust, and someone broke it." That sentence would become Riley's obsession, because who broke Elvis's trust? Who was the person Elvis feared, and why was that fear still lingering in the house, passed down like a dark inheritance? Even more disturbing, Lisa Marie left a final note tucked into one of the journals. It was dated just months before her death. "Riley, if you're reading this, then it's yours now. You're the last one who can stop it. But you'll have to go deeper than I ever could. Graceland has one more room, one no one was allowed in, not even me." Riley's search wasn't over, because somewhere inside Graceland was the final key to breaking the curse, or proving it was real all along. Elvis's will was a lie. For decades, fans believed the official story, that Elvis left everything to Lisa Marie, that Priscilla helped preserve his legacy, and that Graceland remained a sacred tribute to the man who changed music forever. But that's not what Riley Keough discovered, because the truth is far darker, and it starts with a name almost no one outside the Presley family talks about: Aunt Delta. Delta Mae Biggs. Elvis's aunt on his father's side. She moved into Graceland in 1967. Delta wasn't just an aging relative clinging to the past. She was in control. According to newly uncovered legal memos found in Vernon Presley's files, Delta had what insiders now call quiet authority. Vernon, Elvis's father and executor of the estate, gave her full access to private family documents, vaults, and yes, even the upstairs rooms that fans were never allowed to see. Riley learned all this through a legal battle she never expected to fight. After Lisa Marie's death, Riley was thrust into the center of a storm. On one side, Priscilla Presley, Elvis's former wife, challenging Lisa's will and claiming she was removed unfairly as trustee. On the other side, Riley, young, grieving, and now the face of a billion-dollar legacy. But when Riley started going through legal records, one thing stood out. Elvis's original will didn't match the one that was filed in probate. The signature was real, but key names were missing. One of them? Vernon's longtime lawyer, a man named Wallace Thompson, who reportedly drafted a second document naming a different executor altogether. And according to Riley's legal team, that document was never submitted to the court. It was buried. Why? Because the person Elvis actually wanted to control Graceland wasn't someone famous. It wasn't Priscilla. It wasn't even Lisa Marie. It was a man named Robert Gene Smith, a former bodyguard turned estate manager who lived in the guest house behind the mansion. Smith had worked for Elvis since 1972. He was quiet, loyal, and always stayed out of the spotlight. Elvis trusted him, not just with money, but with secrets. And it was Smith who reportedly helped Elvis hide sensitive documents and letters in the upstairs study. Riley found Smith's name referenced in a legal draft titled Contingency Executor, should Vernon become incapacitated. That draft was signed by Elvis on June 3, 1977, just 2 months before his death. So what happened? Why wasn't Smith ever mentioned again? Because after Elvis died, Vernon moved fast. Within days, he changed the locks, dismissed half the staff, including Smith, and rewrote the estate structure. Delta, by then, was already living upstairs. She didn't protest. She didn't have to, because Vernon made one quiet arrangement. Delta would stay in Graceland, as long as she said nothing. And for 30 years, she didn't. She stayed in her suite, gave no interviews, and watched as tourists came and went. Meanwhile, she kept her own records, handwritten notes, letters from Vernon, and even personal checks signed by Elvis. Riley found them stashed inside a sewing box in the attic. But there was something else too. A small envelope with no name, just a single line. They never read the real will. Inside it was a carbon copy of a document that listed not one, but 2 heirs to Graceland, Lisa Marie, and someone identified only as M. Harmon. That name sent shockwaves through the Presley legal team, because Riley knew who it was. Marion Harmon, a woman now in her 70s, who had once worked as a private nurse for Elvis's mother, Gladys. She was never publicly linked to Elvis, but in the early 1970s, she suddenly appeared on the payroll, and in 1975, she purchased a home in Memphis, paid for, in full, by a private benefactor. Riley's team tracked her down. What Marion revealed stunned them. She claimed Elvis told her she was part of the family, that she had been taken in for reasons no one could understand at the time. She never claimed to be a lover or a blood relative, but in 1976, Elvis signed over a life insurance policy with her listed as a secondary dependent. So why keep her a secret? Because Marion was one more layer in a web Elvis never managed to untangle. A web built on loyalty, secrecy, and betrayal. Which brings us back to the present. Riley's fight to retain control over Graceland wasn't just about honoring Lisa Marie's wishes. It was about protecting Elvis's legacy from being gutted. Corporate interests, distant relatives, and she's not wrong. Emails leaked during the 2023 lawsuit showed internal plans to convert part of Graceland into a private event space, something Elvis reportedly forbid in a 1976 letter to Vernon. So what now? Riley has sealed off parts of Graceland once again. She's halted all redevelopment. And she's ordered a full audit of every file connected to Vernon and Delta's oversight of the estate. But one question still remains. Why did Elvis feel the need to hide the truth about who would control Graceland? The answer, Riley believes, lies in a place no tourist has ever seen. A room buried deeper than even the upstairs bedroom. A space not marked on any blueprint. A chamber Riley says was intentionally removed from public records in the early 1980s. It was called the Reflection Room. No one outside the family even knew it existed. Until now. Riley unlocks the door to Elvis's final secret. A room frozen since 1977, with contents so shocking they could change the way we remember the king forever. When Riley Keough unlocked that long-sealed bedroom at Graceland, untouched since August 1977, she didn't just open a door, she stepped through a portal into Elvis Presley's final hours. The room was a perfect time capsule, preserved in eerie stillness. Dust motes swirled in the sunlight as the musty scent of old paper, leather, and the faintest trace of Elvis's favorite cologne, a ghost of his presence, filled the air. The nightstand told its own haunting story. Medicine bottles stood exactly where Elvis had left them, their labels faded but still readable. Quaaludes, Demerol, Seconal, the very drugs history would blame for his death. But beneath them lay something far more revealing. A leather-bound notebook, its pages open to August 15, 1977, the day before the King's tragic passing. The handwriting was rushed, uneven, as if written in distress. The last lyrics Elvis ever penned sent chills down Riley's spine. They're gonna blame the pills, but it's bigger than that. Every detail in the room seemed frozen in time. A coffee cup with dried residue at the bottom, a pair of sunglasses resting on a newspaper, even the indentation on the pillow where Elvis had last laid his head. But the most unsettling discovery? A phone log with a single call circled in red ink. A 2 a.m. conversation with an unlisted number, placed just hours before his death. This wasn't just a bedroom. It was a crime scene. And the biggest clue of all? Hidden beneath the floorboards, a small, locked vault, marked with Elvis's initials, waiting to reveal secrets that could rewrite history. The room held far more secrets than anyone could have imagined. Among the most disturbing finds was a phone log with a single entry circled in frantic red ink. A 2 a.m. call to a mysterious unnamed contact, placed just hours before Elvis's death. The number was unlisted, the recipient unknown, leaving investigators to wonder, who was Elvis desperately trying to reach in his final hours? Nearby, a well-worn jacket hung draped over a chair as if waiting for its owner to return. Its pockets revealed intimate fragments of Elvis's last night alive, a handful of loose change, a crumpled receipt from the diner where he'd eaten his final meal, and a ticket stub from what would be his last movie outing. These ordinary items became heartbreaking relics when viewed through the lens of tragedy. But the most revealing discoveries came from Elvis's private journals. Page after page contained increasingly distressed entries filled with ominous warnings and eerie premonitions. In one particularly chilling passage, written just weeks before his death, Elvis had scrawled, "I'm not going to make it to 50. They won't let me." Other entries hinted at shadowy figures controlling his career, financial troubles he couldn't escape, and a growing sense that his time was running out. The journals painted a portrait of a man who saw his demise coming, a stark contrast to the official narrative of accidental overdose. Combined with the other artifacts in the room, they suggested Elvis may have known his death wasn't going to be what it seemed. These weren't just personal effects. They were pieces of a puzzle that, when put together, could rewrite the story of music's most iconic tragedy. But the most shocking discovery lay hidden beneath the floorboards, a small, locked vault bearing Elvis's engraved initials, completely untouched since 1977. Riley's hands trembled as she brushed away decades of dust, revealing a secure compartment that could hold anything from unreleased music to explosive personal revelations. Whatever secrets this time capsule contains might finally reveal the truth behind the King's untimely death and change everything we know about music history forever. Smash that like button if you believe Graceland's secrets aren't done yet, and subscribe because next week, we're unsealing Elvis's private vault, and you won't believe what's inside.
What we were part of till after it was gone, and we spent a lifetime with a legend from the time we were kids until we're grown men, and it was a hell of an experience.
Red West is dying, and at 81, he's finally ready to destroy everything you think you know about Elvis Presley. This isn't some nostalgic trip down memory lane. This is a confession that will shatter the myth of the king forever. Because Red West didn't just work for Elvis. He didn't just protect Elvis. He was Elvis's closest friend, his most trusted confidant, and the only man who dared to tell him the truth, when everyone else was feeding him lies. And now, with nothing left to lose, Red is about to reveal the one secret that could have saved Elvis's life. The secret that's been eating him alive for over 40 years. You want to know what really killed Elvis Presley? It wasn't drugs. It wasn't fame. It wasn't the pressure of being a superstar. It was the people who claimed to love him most. The people who were supposed to protect him, but instead became his destroyers. And Red West? He was the only one who tried to stop it. But here's the shocking truth nobody wants to admit. When Red finally spoke out, when he finally told the world what was really happening behind the gates of Graceland, the world turned on him so viciously that he became the most hated man in America overnight. They called him a traitor, a sellout, a bitter ex-friend trying to cash in on Elvis's pain. But what they didn't know was that Red West had just done something no one else had the guts to do. He chose Elvis's life over Elvis's image, and it destroyed him. This man sitting in front of us isn't just any former bodyguard. This is the guy who stood up to bullies for Elvis when they were just kids in Memphis. This is the man who took bullets meant for the king. This is the friend who watched Elvis transform from a shy, polite teenager into the most famous person on the planet, and then watched him slowly die in front of his eyes. Red's voice cracks when he tells you about that day in 1954 at Humes High School. Not because he's getting sentimental, but because he knows that's the day everything started. That's the day he made a promise to protect Elvis Presley that would eventually tear both their lives apart. Picture this: Red West, built like a tank, the kind of kid who could end your high school career with one punch. And there's Elvis, skinny, different, wearing clothes that made him a target for every bully in Memphis. When those older boys cornered Elvis by the lockers, ready to beat him down for being different, Red didn't hesitate. He stepped in, not because he was looking for a fight, but because something inside him couldn't stand watching someone get destroyed for refusing to be like everyone else. That single moment of protection created a bond that would last over 20 years. But it also created a responsibility that Red could never escape. From that day forward, Red West became Elvis Presley's shield against the world. What Red couldn't have known was that 20 years later, he'd have to make the most impossible choice of his life. Save Elvis from himself, or watch him die slowly while the world cheered. And when Red finally made that choice, when he finally broke his silence and told the world what was really happening to Elvis, the timing was so catastrophic that it made him look like the man who killed the king. But here's what Red wants you to understand. He didn't betray Elvis Presley. He tried to save him. And the fact that he failed, the fact that Elvis died just 2 weeks after Red's tell-all book hit the shelves, has been destroying Red West from the inside out for over 40 years. You think you know this story? You think you know what happened between Elvis and his bodyguards? You have no idea. Because Red West isn't just telling you about Elvis's downfall, he's confessing to his own role in it. He's admitting to the moments when he stayed silent, when he should have spoken up. He's revealing the times when loyalty became complicity, when love became enablement, when protection became prison. And most shocking of all, he's about to tell you exactly what he saw happening to Elvis that made him risk everything to try to save him. But first, you need to understand how deep their bond really went. You want to know what it was really like inside Elvis's inner circle? Forget everything you've seen in the movies. Forget the glamorous stories about jets and Cadillacs and wild parties. Red West is about to tell you what really happened behind those gates at Graceland. and it's going to make you sick. The Memphis Mafia wasn't just Elvis's entourage. It was a machine designed to keep Elvis happy, comfortable, and completely cut off from reality. And Red West wasn't just muscle. He was Elvis's conscience. The only man brave enough to look the king in the eye and tell him he was destroying himself. But here's what nobody understands. Red didn't have a job. He had a prison sentence. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, Red's entire existence revolved around Elvis's moods, Elvis's needs, and Elvis's increasingly dangerous whims. When Elvis wanted to ride motorcycles through the desert at 3 in the morning, Red was there. When Elvis decided to fly to Denver at midnight for a peanut butter sandwich, Red was on that plane. When Elvis wanted to have karate fights in the backyard or gospel sing-alongs until dawn, Red was right there beside him. There was no schedule, there was no time off. There was only Elvis time. And Elvis time was slowly killing everyone around him. But Red's position was different from everyone else's. While the other guys were happy to be yes men, Red was the one Elvis trusted to tell him the truth. And that trust was about to become the most dangerous thing in Red's life. Because by the early 1970s, Red was watching Elvis transform into someone he didn't recognize. The shy, polite kid from Memphis was gone. In his place was a man who was suspicious of everyone, paranoid about everything, and completely dependent on a cocktail of pills that would have killed a horse. Red watched Elvis nod off mid-conversation. He watched him slur his words during performances. He watched him explode in rage over nothing, then apologize with tears in his eyes 20 minutes later. The man who once lit up every room he entered was now carrying a darkness so heavy it was suffocating everyone around him. And here's the part that still haunts Red. Everyone else just pretended it wasn't happening. The other guys in the Memphis Mafia had figured out the unspoken rule. Don't challenge Elvis. Don't question Elvis. Don't upset Elvis. Just smile, nod, and collect your paycheck. Because Elvis was kind-hearted but sensitive, generous but proud, and if you crossed him at the wrong moment, you were done. So when Elvis started taking pills to sleep, pills to wake up, pills to perform, and pills to forget, nobody said a word. When he started gaining weight and losing his grip on reality, everyone just looked the other way. When he started locking himself in his room for days at a time, only emerging when he felt safe enough to face the world again, they all just waited patiently outside his door. But Red couldn't do it. He couldn't watch his friend slowly kill himself while everyone around him enabled it. Red started speaking up, first gently, then more forcefully. He'd pull Elvis aside and try to talk to him about the pills, about his health, about the dangerous path he was on. But Elvis didn't want to hear it. He was surrounded by people telling him he was fine, he was perfect, he was invincible. Why would he listen to the one guy telling him he was in trouble? The paranoia got worse. Elvis started accusing people of stealing from him, spying on him, plotting against him. He'd obsessively check locks, demand sudden security sweeps, and turn on his own staff without warning. Red watched his friend become convinced that everyone was out to get him, when the truth was that everyone was just trying to keep him happy long enough to get paid. And then there were the nights when Red would stand outside Elvis's door, listening to the silence, wondering if his friend was still breathing. Some nights he'd hear Elvis calling out. Other nights, nothing. But Red always stayed close, knowing that despite everything, Elvis didn't really want to be alone. Red could see what nobody else would admit. Elvis wasn't just sick. He was terrified. Terrified of dying. Terrified of losing everything. But most of all, terrified of being forgotten. And that fear was driving him to take bigger risks, make more desperate choices, and push away the people who actually cared about him. The writing was on the wall. Elvis was going to die if something didn't change. And Red West was the only one who seemed to understand that. That's when Red made the decision that would destroy everything. July 1976. After 22 years of loyalty, 22 years of putting his life on the line for Elvis Presley, Red West gets a phone call that destroys everything he believed about friendship, loyalty, and love. But it's not Elvis on the other end of the line. It's Vernon Presley, Elvis's father, delivering a message that cuts deeper than any knife. Your services are no longer needed. That's it. No explanation, no goodbye, no thank you for the 2 decades of devotion. Just a cold corporate dismissal that treats Red West like he's some random employee, instead of the man who once stood between Elvis and death itself. Red doesn't even get to hear it from Elvis, the man he considered his brother, the man he protected with his life, the man he loved like family. Couldn't even pick up the phone to fire him personally. But here's what makes this betrayal even more devastating. Red knows exactly why he's being fired. It's not about money. It's not about downsizing. It's about the truth. Because Red West had become the one thing Elvis couldn't tolerate anymore, a mirror that showed him what he'd become. Red had pushed too hard. He'd questioned the pills too often. He'd challenged Elvis's dangerous choices too many times. And in Elvis's paranoid, drug-addled mind, that made Red the enemy. Along with Red, his cousin Sonny West and bodyguard Dave Hebler get the same brutal treatment. 3 men who had given their lives to Elvis, thrown away like yesterday's garbage. And for what? For caring too much. For refusing to watch their friend kill himself, slowly, while everyone else cheered. The pain is unbearable. But what comes next is something nobody could have predicted. Red West is about to make the most controversial decision of his life. He's going to write a book. Not just any book. A tell-all that will expose everything he witnessed behind the closed doors of Graceland. Every pill, every breakdown, every moment of paranoia and rage that the world never saw. The book will be called Elvis, What Happened? And it's going to detonate like a nuclear bomb in the heart of Elvis's empire. Red tells himself he's not doing it for revenge. He's not doing it for money. He's doing it because he believes that if the truth comes out, if the world sees what's really happening to Elvis, maybe someone will finally intervene. Maybe someone will finally save him. But deep down, Red knows there's something else driving him. Hurt, betrayal, the raw, agonizing pain of being thrown away by the person he loved most in the world. Red, Sonny, and Dave work with writer Steve Dunleavy to craft their story. And it's brutal. They detail Elvis's drug use, his violent outbursts, his paranoia, his complete disconnection from reality. They paint a picture of a man who's been destroyed by fame, enabled by sycophants, and abandoned by the very people who should have saved him. But they also show Elvis's kindness, his generosity, his deep spiritual searching. They don't want to destroy Elvis. They want to save him. They want the world to see that the king is dying and nobody's doing anything about it. The book is scheduled for release in August 1977. Red believes that once it hits the shelves, once the world sees what's really happening, Elvis will be forced to get help. The people around him will be forced to stop enabling him. Something will finally change. But fate has other plans. On August 16, 1977, just 2 weeks after Elvis, What Happened, hits bookstores, Elvis Presley is found dead in his bathroom at Graceland. The cause of death: cardiac arrest brought on by a drug overdose. The timing is catastrophic. Suddenly, Red West isn't the man who tried to save Elvis. He's the man who killed him. He's the traitor who destroyed the king's reputation right before the king died. The headlines are vicious. Elvis betrayed by his own bodyguards. Tell-all book destroys Elvis days before his death. Red West, the man who murdered the king. The hate mail pours in. Death threats, accusations. The entire world turns on Red West with a fury that nearly destroys him. But Red knows something the world doesn't understand. He knows that Elvis dying 2 weeks after the book's release wasn't coincidence. It was confirmation. Confirmation that everything in that book was true. Confirmation that Elvis was exactly as sick as Red had said he was. The book wasn't Elvis's death sentence. It was his final warning. A warning that came too late to save him. At 81 years old, Red West sits in his chair. And for the first time in over 40 years, he's ready to tell you the one truth that will change everything you think you know about Elvis Presley's death. You want to know if Red West regrets writing that book? You want to know if he feels guilty about exposing Elvis's secrets to the world? You want to know if he blames himself for what happened on August 16, 1977? Here's Red's answer. I regret that I didn't write it sooner. You heard that right. Red West doesn't regret telling the truth about Elvis. He regrets waiting so long to tell it. Because maybe, just maybe, if he'd spoken up years earlier, Elvis would still be alive today. But here's the confession that's been eating Red alive for decades. The book wasn't really about saving Elvis. Not entirely. Red knew by 1977 that Elvis was already too far gone to save. The pills had taken over. The paranoia had consumed him. The people around him had made it impossible for anyone to reach him. So why did Red really write that book? Why did he risk everything to tell the world what was happening behind the gates of Graceland? Because Red West couldn't stand the thought of Elvis being remembered as a joke. He couldn't stand the idea that history would remember the king as some bloated, drug-addled caricature who died on a bathroom floor. He couldn't let the world forget that Elvis Presley was a human being who suffered, who struggled, who was destroyed by the very fame that made him immortal. Red's voice breaks when he tells you this. I didn't write that book to hurt Elvis. I wrote it to save his humanity. Because the people around him, they were turning him into a myth, a god, something that wasn't real. And I knew that if we didn't tell the truth, if we didn't show the world that Elvis was human, that he was in pain, that he needed help, then his death would be meaningless. Red knew something that nobody else understood. Elvis wasn't just dying from drugs. He was dying from isolation. He was dying from being worshipped instead of loved. He was dying from being treated like a god instead of a man who desperately needed help. And the saddest part? Red believes that deep down, Elvis wanted someone to tell the truth. He wanted someone to break through the wall of yes men and enablers and say, this man is dying, and we need to help him. But by the time Red found the courage to speak up, it was too late. Here's what Red wants every Elvis fan to understand. Elvis Presley didn't die because 3 bodyguards betrayed him. Elvis Presley died because dozens of people who claimed to love him chose to stay silent while he slowly destroyed himself. Red West was the only one who refused to stay silent, and for that, he became the most hated man in America. But Red doesn't care about the hate anymore. He doesn't care about the death threats or the accusations or the 40 years of being called a traitor, because he knows something the world is finally starting to understand. He was right. Every word in that book was true. Every revelation about Elvis's drug use, his paranoia, his isolation, his desperation was absolutely accurate. And if people had listened, if they had taken those warnings seriously, instead of attacking the messenger, maybe Elvis could have gotten the help he needed. Red's final message to the world is this. I loved Elvis Presley like a brother. I protected him. I served him. I would have died for him. But when it mattered most, when his life was on the line, I was the only one who chose to tell the truth instead of protecting his image. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Red West isn't asking for forgiveness. He's not asking for understanding. He's not asking for anything except this. Remember Elvis Presley as a human being who deserved better than the people who surrounded him. And remember that sometimes the greatest act of love is telling the truth, even when it destroys you. That's Red West's final confession. At 81 years old, he's finally told you everything. And now, the weight of those secrets can finally be lifted from his shoulders. The truth as painful as it is, has finally set him free. Red West's shocking confession changes everything we thought we knew about Elvis's final years. If this revelation stunned you, smash that like button and subscribe for more explosive celebrity secrets that have been buried for decades. What other dark truths are famous bodyguards hiding? Find out next.